What if everything that's stressing you out right now doesn't actually matter? What if the things keeping you awake at night, the things you keep replaying in your head, the things you're trying so hard to fix, are not the real problem? What if you're just caring about the wrong things? Title: What if you're caring about the wrong things? Take a moment and think about your day. From the moment you wake up, your mind is already full. You think about what you need to do. You think about what could go wrong. You think about how people see you. And without realizing it, you start giving importance to everything. A message that hasn't been replied to, a small mistake you made, a comment someone said, and suddenly, your entire mood depends on it. But let me ask you something. Out of everything you thought about today, how many of those things actually changed your life? Not felt important, not seemed urgent, but truly mattered? Because if you're honest, most of it didn't, and yet, it took most of your energy. That's the problem. You're not overwhelmed because life is too much. You're overwhelmed because you're giving importance to things that don't deserve it. And this is exactly where everything begins. Transition into the topic. Inspired by the subtle art of not giving a F***ck by Mark Manson. This is not about becoming careless. This is not about ignoring everything. This is about something deeper. It's about understanding that your attention is limited. Your energy is limited. Your time is limited. And every time you give it to something meaningless, you lose it for something meaningful. So the real question is not, how do I stop caring? The real question is, am I caring about the right things? Main body script. You don't wake up one day and decide to care about everything. It happens slowly, without you noticing. You start caring about what people think. You start caring about doing everything right. You start caring about avoiding mistakes. And at first, it feels normal, but over time, it becomes heavy because now, everything feels important. A simple message becomes something to analyze. A small mistake becomes something to replay. A decision becomes something to overthink. And your mind never stops. You think more. You analyze more. You try to understand everything. But nothing changes because the problem isn't your thinking. The problem is what you're giving importance to. Let's make it real. You send a message, they don't reply right away. And suddenly, your mind starts asking questions. Did I say something wrong? Did they misunderstand me? Are they ignoring me? You check your phone again and again. But when they finally reply, it's simple, they were just busy. Nothing was wrong. But you already spent your energy, not on reality, but on something you created in your mind. Now look at another moment. You're in a conversation, you want to say something, but you hesitate. What if it sounds wrong? What if they judge me? What if I make it awkward? So you stay quiet. And later, you think about it, you replay it. You imagine how it could have gone. But the moment is already gone. You didn't lose the moment because you didn't know what to say. You lost it because you cared too much about how it would be received. Now think about your decisions. You have something you want to do, something you've been thinking about, but you don't start because you're waiting, waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel certain, waiting to know it will work. But that moment never comes, because certainty doesn't come before action, and by waiting, you stay where you are. This is how it builds. Small moments, small thoughts, small hesitations, until one day, you feel it, that mental exhaustion, that constant pressure, that feeling that everything is too much. But here's the truth. Life didn't become too much. You just started carrying too much. You gave importance to things that don't deserve it. You gave your attention to what people think, what could go wrong, what might happen, and now your mind is full, not with what matters, but with everything else. Here's a question you need to face. If everything feels important, how do you decide what actually matters? You don't. And that's why you feel lost, because without choosing what matters, everything competes for your attention, and your mind tries to hold it all, but it can't. So it keeps thinking, keeps analyzing, keeps searching for control. But control was never the solution, because you were never meant to control everything. You were meant to choose. Choose what deserves your attention. Choose what deserves your energy. Choose what deserves your care. And let everything else exist without carrying it. But that's where the real difficulty begins, because letting go doesn't feel safe. Holding on feels like control, even if it's exhausting. Letting go feels uncertain, even if it's freeing. So you stay where you are, not because it's better, but because it's familiar. And that's the moment where everything can change. Emotional turning point. At some point, you notice something. You're not just tired, you're drained. Not from doing too much, but from thinking too much, caring too much, holding too much. And for a moment, you stop, not to distract yourself, not to scroll, not to escape. You just sit there, and for the first time, you see it clearly. You've been reacting to everything, every opinion, every situation, every thought, without ever asking, does this even matter? And that question hits differently, because now, you don't just feel overwhelmed. You understand why. You've been giving your energy away to things that don't move your life forward, to things that don't define who you are, to things that don't even last. And for the first time, you consider something different. What if I stopped? Not stopped caring completely, but stopped caring about everything. What if I chose what actually matters? What if I let go of what doesn't? And in that moment, something shifts. Not everything, just enough. Enough to see that you don't need to carry it all. Enough to realize that not everything deserves your attention. Enough to understand that your life feels heavy because you've been holding on to too much. And maybe this is where it changes, not because life becomes easier, but because you finally stop making everything important. And for the first time, your mind feels a little quieter, not empty, but clear, because now you're starting to choose, and that changes everything. Reflection questions. Now take a moment, not to rush, not to answer quickly, just to be honest. Out of everything you've been thinking about lately, how much of it truly matters? What are you holding on to right now that you already know is draining you? Is it someone's opinion, a past mistake, a situation you can't control? Why are you still giving it your energy? If that thing disappeared tomorrow, would your life actually change in a meaningful way? Or would you just replace it with something else to worry about? Think about your decisions. How many of them are based on what you truly want? And how many are based on what you're afraid might happen? Are you choosing your life? Or are you reacting to it? What are you avoiding right now? A conversation, a decision, a risk. And what is it costing you to keep avoiding it? Now ask yourself something deeper. If you stopped caring about what people think, what would you finally do? If you accepted that mistakes are part of the process, what would you try? If you knew that not everything needs to be perfect, what would you start today? Now here's the question that changes everything. What actually matters to you? Not what looks good, not what feels safe, not what others expect, but what truly matters. And once you know the answer, another question follows. Are you living in alignment with that? Or are you distracted by things that don't belong in your life? Because awareness is not the end. It's the beginning. Core lessons summary. This is what everything comes down to. 1. You are not overwhelmed because life is too much. You are overwhelmed because you are trying to give importance to everything. And when everything feels important, nothing is clear. 2. Your attention is your most valuable resource. Where your attention goes, your energy follows. And where your energy goes, your life is shaped. So if you give your attention to things that don't matter, you slowly build a life around things that don't matter. 3. Overthinking is not the problem. Overthinking is a symptom, a result of giving too much importance to things that don't deserve it. For you are always choosing what to care about. Even if it doesn't feel like it, you choose what you focus on. You choose what you hold on to. You choose what affects you. And that means you can also choose differently. 5. Not everything deserves your reaction. Just because something happens doesn't mean it deserves your attention. Just because a thought appears doesn't mean it deserves your belief. 6. Discomfort is part of growth. You avoid action because it feels uncomfortable. But that discomfort is not a sign to stop. It's often a sign that you're moving forward. 7. You don't need to control everything. Trying to control every outcome, every opinion, every possibility is what creates mental exhaustion. Letting go is not losing control. It's choosing what matters. 8. Clarity comes from action, not endless thinking. You don't need more time to think. You need the courage to move, because clarity comes after action, not before it. 9. You don't need to fix your whole life. You just need to stop giving importance to things that were never meant to matter. Final thought. You don't need to care less about everything. You need to care about the right things, because in the end, your life is not shaped by everything you think about. It's shaped by what you decide is worth your attention. Reflection questions. Part 2. Deeper layer. Now go deeper. If your thoughts were visible, if people could see everything happening in your mind, would you still believe all of it? Or would you start questioning it? How many of your worries are based on facts? And how many are based on assumptions? Are you reacting to reality? Or reacting to the version of reality you created in your head? Think about the last thing that stressed you. Is it still affecting you now? If not, why did it feel so important at the time? How many times have you been wrong about something you were so sure about? And if you've been wrong before, what makes you so certain now? What are you trying to protect? Your image, your comfort, your sense of control, and is protecting those things limiting your growth? Now ask yourself this. What is one thing you've been holding on to? Not because it matters, but because it feels familiar. What would happen if you let it go? Not hypothetically, not someday, but now. Would your life fall apart, or would it create space for something better? Now think about your time. If you continue living the same way, thinking the same thoughts, reacting the same way, where will you be in 1 year? And are you okay with that? Because change doesn't come from understanding alone. It comes from choosing something different. Core Lessons Summary Part 2 Advanced Layer. This is where everything becomes clearer. 10. You are not your thoughts. Just because you think something doesn't mean it's true. Just because you feel something doesn't mean it defines you. Your thoughts are signals, not commands. 11. You give meaning to everything. Nothing has meaning on its own. You assign it. A comment can be ignored, or it can ruin your day. The difference is not the situation. It's the meaning you give it. 12. You are addicted to mental control. You think more because you want certainty, because you want to avoid mistakes, because you want to feel safe. But that constant need for control is what creates the pressure. 13. Avoidance is the real trap. You don't avoid things because you're lazy. You avoid them because they feel uncomfortable. But avoidance doesn't remove the problem. It delays it, and often makes it bigger. 14. Most things don't matter long term. What feels big now usually becomes irrelevant later. But in the moment, you treat it like everything depends on it. That's where your energy goes. 15. Your focus determines your reality. What you pay attention to becomes your experience. If you focus on problems, your life feels heavy. If you focus on what matters, your life feels clear. 16. You cannot grow without letting go. You can't hold on to everything and still move forward. Growth requires releasing something. Old habits, old fears, old ways of thinking. 17. You don't need perfect clarity to act. Waiting for certainty is another form of avoidance. You don't need to feel ready. You need to be willing. 18. Your life reflects your priorities. Not what you say matters, not what you think matters, but what you actually give your time and energy to. That is your real life. 19. Simplicity is a choice. Life feels complicated because you're trying to manage too much. When you reduce what you care about, everything becomes clearer. 20. Peace comes from acceptance, not control. You don't find peace by fixing everything. You find it by accepting that not everything needs to be fixed. Final thought expanded. You've been trying to manage everything in your life, every thought, every outcome, every possibility. But maybe the answer was never to manage more. Maybe the answer was to let go of what doesn't matter, because in the end, you don't need a perfect life. You need a focused one, and that begins the moment you decide what is truly worth your attention. Quotable lines plus meaning. Not giving a F asterisk CK does not mean being indifferent. It means being comfortable with being different. This is where most people misunderstand everything. Caring less doesn't mean you stop feeling. It doesn't mean you disconnect from life. It means you stop adjusting yourself just to be accepted. It means you stop shaping your actions based on fear of judgment, and instead, you choose to stand on what matters to you, even if it's not understood by everyone. The desire for more positive experience is itself a negative experience. The more you chase happiness, the more you notice what you don't have. The more you try to feel good all the time, the more pressure you create for yourself. Because life was never meant to be constantly positive. It was meant to be real, and real includes discomfort. Everything worthwhile in life is won through surmounting the associated negative experience. There is no meaningful path without difficulty, no growth without discomfort, no confidence without facing fear. So when things feel hard, it doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. It often means you're finally on the right one. Who you are is defined by what you're willing to struggle for. Everyone wants the result, but very few people accept the process. Your life is not built on what you want. It's built on what you are willing to go through, because your struggles are what shape your direction. You are always choosing what to give a F asterisk CK about. Even when it doesn't feel like it, even when it feels automatic, you are choosing what to focus on. You are choosing what to hold on to. You are choosing what affects you. And once you realize that, you stop feeling like everything is happening to you. You start realizing you have control over your attention. Action isn't just the effect of motivation, it's also the cause of it. You're waiting to feel ready, to feel confident, to feel certain. But those feelings don't come first. They come after you act. So the longer you wait, the longer you stay stuck. To not give a F asterisk CK is to stare down life's most difficult challenges and still take action. This is not about avoiding problems. It's about facing them without being controlled by fear. It's about moving forward. Even when things are uncertain, even when things are uncomfortable, you and everyone you know are going to be dead soon. This is not meant to scare you. It's meant to wake you up. Because when you truly understand this, a lot of things lose their weight. Embarrassment becomes smaller. Judgment becomes less powerful. Overthinking becomes unnecessary. Because in the bigger picture, most of the things you worry about won't matter. Closing thought for this section. These ideas are not meant to make you feel comfortable. They're meant to make you aware. Aware of what you're holding. Aware of what you're focusing on. Aware of what actually matters. Because once you see clearly, you can't go back to caring about everything the same way. Scenario 1. The silent room. You're in a group. People are talking, laughing, sharing stories. You have something to say, you know you do, but your mind starts moving. What if it's not interesting? What if they don't respond? What if it gets awkward? So you stay quiet, you listen, you nod, you wait, and the moment passes. later when you're alone. That's when it comes back. You replay it, you think about what you should have said, how you could have said it better, how it might have changed the moment, but the truth is simple. It wasn't the situation that stopped you. It was how much you cared about being judged. Scenario 2, the notification that changed everything. You wake up feeling okay. Nothing heavy, nothing stressful. Then you open your phone, you see someone your age succeeding, someone traveling, someone doing something you've always wanted. And suddenly, your mood shifts. Now you feel behind. Now you feel like you're not doing enough. Now you question where you are in life. Nothing in your reality changed, but your focus did. You gave importance to something that had nothing to do with your path, and now it's affecting how you see your own life. Scenario 3, the yes you regret. Someone asks you for a favor. You don't want to do it. You're already tired. You have your own priorities, but you hesitate. What if they get disappointed? What if they think I'm rude? So you say yes. And the moment you do, you feel it, that quiet frustration, that weight, because you didn't say yes for the right reason. You said yes to avoid discomfort. And now, you're the one carrying it. Scenario 4, the decision you keep delaying. There's something you've been thinking about, a decision, a change, a step forward. You've thought about it many times, but every time you get close, your mind steps in. What if it doesn't work? What if I regret it? What if I fail? So you wait. You tell yourself you need more time, more clarity, more confidence, but days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into months, and nothing happens, not because you don't know what to do, but because you care too much about avoiding the wrong outcome. Scenario 5, the small mistake that felt big. You make a small mistake, something minor, something most people won't even remember, but you notice it. And your mind holds on to it, you replay it, you think about how it looked, what others might think. Hours pass, and it's still there, but here's the truth. Most people forgot about it minutes later. You didn't. Not because it mattered, but because you made it matter. Scenario 6, the night you couldn't turn it off. It's late, everything is quiet, but your mind is. You think about your future, you think about your mistakes, you think about things you can't control. The more you try to stop, the more it continues, because your mind is trying to solve everything, fix everything, control everything. But not everything needs to be solved, and not everything is yours to carry. Scenario 7, the version of you that isn't real. You try to be someone, someone who doesn't fail, someone who is always confident, someone who has everything figured out. So every time something goes wrong, you feel pressure because it doesn't match the image you're trying to maintain. But that image isn't real. And the more you try to protect it, the more exhausted you become, because you're not just living your life. You're trying to manage how it looks. Closing thought for these scenarios. These moments seem small, almost unimportant, but they happen every day, and over time. They shape how you think, how you feel, how you live. Because it's not the big events that drain you, it's the small things that you decided were important. The silent room. You're sitting in a room full of people, voices overlap. Laughter fills the space. Stories move from one person to another. Everyone seems comfortable. Everyone seems natural, and you're there, listening, watching, waiting. There's something on your mind, a thought, an idea, something you want to say, you feel it, right there, ready. But before the words come out, something else speaks first. What if it's not interesting? What if they don't respond? What if it kills the mood, so you pause, you wait for the right moment? But the moment moves, the conversation shifts, someone else speaks, and just like that, your chance disappears. You tell yourself it's fine, you'll say something later, but later never comes, so you stay quiet, you nod. You react just enough to be part of it, but not enough to be seen. And the conversation continues. Without you, time passes, people laugh again, someone shares something random, another person interrupts, and you realize something. Nobody is thinking as much as you are. Nobody is analyzing every word. Nobody is trying to be perfect. They're just speaking, but you're not. Because in your mind, everything matters, every word, every reaction, every possible outcome, and that's what stops you. Not the situation, not the people, but the weight you placed on the moment. Eventually it ends. You leave the room, and now it's quiet, but your mind is. It starts replaying everything. You think about what you could have said, how you could have said it, how it might have gone. You imagine their reactions. You rewrite the moment over and over again, and now it feels important. Now it feels like you missed something, but here's the truth. The moment wasn't important. You made it important. You gave it weight. You gave it pressure. You gave it meaning it didn't need. And because of that, you lost it. Now ask yourself this. How many moments have you stayed silent? Not because you had nothing to say, but because you cared too much about how it would be received. How many times have you held back? Because you wanted it to be perfect. And how many of those moments are gone now because the reality is simple. Nobody remembers what you didn't say, but you do. You carry it, you think about it, you give it meaning. And that's where the weight comes from, not from the moment itself, but from how much you cared about it. Now imagine something different. Imagine saying it anyway, not perfectly, not at the perfect time, just honestly. Maybe it lands, maybe it doesn't, but at least it's real. At least you were there, because in the end, it's not the moments where you spoke imperfectly that stay with you. It's the moments where you stayed silent, when you didn't need to, and maybe it was never about saying the perfect thing. Maybe it was about caring less, so you could finally say anything at all. The Silent Room Part 2, The Shift. The next time you're in that room, it happens again. Same noise, same laughter, same kind of conversations, and once again, you feel it, that moment, that thought, something you want to say, and just like before, your mind starts to move. What if it sounds wrong? What if they don't respond? What if it's awkward, but this time, something is different? You notice it. Not the room, not the people, your thoughts. You see them for what they are. Not facts, not reality, just noise, just possibilities your mind is creating. And for the first time, you don't follow them, you don't try to solve them, you don't try to perfect your words, you just let them be. And in that small space, between the thought and your action, you make a choice, you speak, not perfectly, not at the perfect moment, but honestly, and for a second. There's a pause, not a bad one, just a normal one. Someone responds, another person reacts. The conversation continues, and that's it. Nothing dramatic, nothing life-changing, but something inside you shifts because you realize something simple. It was never as serious as you made it. The pressure, the fear, the overthinking. It was all coming from you, not from the moment. And now you feel it, not confidence, not excitement, but something quieter. Relief. Relief that you don't need to get everything right. Relief that you don't need to control every outcome. Relief that you don't need to care about every reaction. And in that moment, the room feels different, not because it changed, but because you did. You're still aware, you still notice things, but you're not carrying everything anymore. You're not holding every word, every reaction, every possibility. You're just there, present, and for the first time. You're not watching the moment pass. You're part of it. Now think about this. How many moments have you missed? Because you were trying to control how they would go. How many times have you stayed silent? Just to avoid something that might not even happen. And what would your life look like if you stopped trying to manage every outcome and just showed up as you are? Because maybe the goal was never to be perfect. Maybe the goal was to be present, to speak when you have something to say, to act even when you're unsure, to exist without overanalyzing every second. And that only happens when you stop giving importance to everything, because in the end, you don't find your voice by thinking about it, you find it the moment you stop caring too much to use it. The Silent Room Part 3, The Internal Conflict. But even after that moment, even after you spoke, even after you felt that small shift, it doesn't just disappear. The next time comes, and your mind tries again. What if this time it goes wrong? What if they react differently? What if it doesn't land? Because your mind doesn't change overnight. It goes back to what it knows, what feels safe, what feels controlled, and you feel it again. That hesitation, that pause, that familiar tension in your chest. But now, there's something new, awareness. You see the pattern, you see how quickly your mind turns a simple moment into something heavy, and instead of fighting it, you question it. Why does this feel so important? What am I actually afraid of? Is this moment really that serious? Or am I just making it serious? And that question creates space. A space where you don't react immediately. A space where you don't believe every thought. And in that space, you begin to understand something deeper. It was never about the room. It was never about the people. It was about what you made it mean. The deeper realization. You weren't afraid of speaking. You were afraid of being seen, seen imperfectly, seen awkwardly, seen without control, because somewhere along the way, you learned that you had to get it right, that you had to be careful, that you had to manage how people see you. But now ask yourself this: who told you that every moment had to be perfect? Who told you that every word needed to be right? And more importantly, why did you believe it? Because look around. People interrupt each other. People say random things. People laugh at things that don't even make sense. And yet, they're part of the moment. So why are you holding yourself to a different standard? Why are you giving this moment more weight? than it actually has. Relatable questions, deeper layer. How many times have you stayed silent? Not because you had nothing to say, but because you were afraid of how it would sound. How many opportunities have you missed? Because you were waiting for the perfect version of yourself. What are you really protecting? When you choose not to speak, your reputation, your image, your comfort, and is protecting those things, costing you real experiences. If nobody judged you, would you still hesitate? If you knew nothing would go wrong, would you finally say what's on your mind? So what's actually stopping you? The situation or the meaning you've attached to it? The shift becomes a choice. At some point, you realize something simple. You will always have thoughts. You will always feel hesitation. You will always have that moment of doubt, but you don't have to follow it. You don't have to obey every thought. You don't have to give every fear importance. You can choose not to remove the fear, but to move with it. And that changes everything, because now it's no longer about waiting to feel ready. It's about acting. Even when you're not. Final reflection for this scene. So the next time you're in that room and you feel that moment again, pause not to overthink, but to ask yourself one question. Is this moment actually important? Or am I just making it important? And if the answer is the same as always, then maybe this time you don't stay silent, because your life is not made up of perfect moments. It's made up of moments you were willing to step into, even when they were. Before versus after, the life you're living versus the life you could live. There are two versions of you, the one you are right now, and the one you could become. Before, the one who cares about everything. You wake up, and before your day even begins, your mind is already running. What do I need to do? What if I mess up? What are people expecting from me? You check your phone, you see something, someone doing better, someone ahead, and just like that, you feel behind. The day hasn't even started, and you're already carrying pressure. You go through your day carefully. You think before you speak. You analyze before you act. In conversations, you hesitate. You have something to say, but you hold it back. What if it sounds wrong? What if they judge me? So you stay quiet. Later, you replay it. You think about what you should have said, how it could have gone, but the moment is gone. When it comes to decisions, you delay. You tell yourself you need more time, more clarity, more certainty. But deep down, you're just afraid, afraid of making the wrong choice, afraid of failing, afraid of regret. So you stay where you are, not because you want to, but because it feels safer. At night, your body is tired, but your mind is. It keeps going, replaying the past, thinking about the future, trying to control everything. And you feel it, that weight, that mental exhaustion, that constant pressure. And you don't even know where it's all coming from. But here's the truth. It's coming from everything you decided to care about. After, the one who chooses what matters. Now imagine something different, not a perfect life, not an easy life, but a clear one. You wake up, and your mind is quieter, not empty, just focused. You still have thoughts, but they don't control you. You check your phone, you see the same things, but this time, You don't compare because you know where you're going. You move through your day differently. In conversations, you speak, not perfectly, not to impress, just honestly. Sometimes it lands, sometimes it doesn't, but you don't carry it afterward because you stopped giving every moment so much weight. When it comes to decisions, you act not because you're sure, but because you're willing. You understand that mistakes will happen, and that's okay. Because you no longer expect perfection, you focus on what matters, and you let everything else pass. At night, your mind slows down, not because life is perfect, but because you're not holding everything anymore. And for the first time, you feel it, that lightness, that clarity, that quiet sense of control, not over everything, but over what you choose to carry, the question that defines everything. Now here's the question: which version are you living right now? And more importantly, which one are you choosing? Because the difference between the two is not luck, it's not talent, it's not even your situation. It's what you decide matters. And once you change that, everything else begins to change with it. What if thought experiments? What if nobody is thinking about you as much as you think they are? What if the people you're trying to impress are too busy thinking about themselves, and all this time you've been holding back for an audience that isn't even watching that closely? What if the mistake you're afraid of making won't matter in a week or a month or even tomorrow? Would you still hesitate if you knew how temporary it really is? What if you've been waiting for confidence when confidence only comes after you act? How many things have you delayed because you wanted to feel ready first? And what if that feeling never comes until you move? What if your overthinking is not helping you, but holding you back? What if all this time you thought you were being careful, but you were actually avoiding risk, avoiding discomfort, avoiding growth? What if you already know what to do, but you're just afraid to decide? How many answers have you been searching for that you already have? What if you stopped trying to control everything? What if you accepted that things can go wrong? People can misunderstand you, and not everything will go your way. Would that free you or scare you? And if it scares you, why? What if the life you want requires you to let go of the things you're holding on to? Your need for approval, your need for certainty, your need to avoid failure. Are you willing to let those go? Or are you more comfortable staying where you are? What if you're not stuck? You're just unwilling to be uncomfortable. What if the only thing standing between you and change is your resistance to feeling uncertain? What if nothing is actually wrong with your life, but the way you're thinking about it? What if your stress, your pressure, your overthinking is coming from meaning you created? And if that's true, what happens when you stop creating that meaning? What if you only had a limited number of things you could truly care about? Would you still spend it on small moments, on random opinions, on things that don't move your life forward? Or would you choose differently? And here's the question that changes everything. What if You've been caring about the wrong things this whole time, not because you wanted to, but because you never stopped to question it. And if that's true, then maybe your life doesn't need more effort. Maybe it needs a different focus, because in the end, it's not about removing everything that bothers you. It's about choosing what deserves to. Repetition of core idea, layered reinforcement. You don't need to stop caring. You were never meant to stop caring. You just need to care about the right things, because the problem was never that you care too much. It's that you care about everything. You care about opinions that don't shape your life. You care about moments that don't define you. You care about outcomes you can't control. And when everything feels important, your mind has no direction, so it holds on to everything. And that's where the weight comes from. Not from life itself, but from what you decided to carry. You don't need to think more. You don't need to analyze more. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to choose. Choose what deserves your attention. Choose what deserves your energy. Choose what deserves your time. And let everything else exist without holding on to it. Because every time you give importance to something unnecessary, you take it away from something meaningful, and over time, that becomes your life. So say it again. You don't need to care less. You need to care about the right things. And once you understand that, you don't just feel lighter, you become clearer. Strong closing philosophy, final impact. At the end of everything, after all the thinking, all the questions, all the moments you've replayed in your head, you're left with something simple. You can't control everything. You can't control how people see you. You can't control every outcome. You can't control how life unfolds. And trying to is what exhausted you in the first place. But there is something you can control, what you choose to care about, because your life is not built on everything that happens. It's built on what you give meaning to. You will always have problems. You will always face uncertainty. You will always have moments that don't go your way. That will never change. But what can change is what you decide is worth your energy. Because not everything deserves your reaction. Not everything deserves your attention. Not everything deserves your care. And once you accept that, something shifts. You stop trying to fix everything. You stop trying to control everything. You stop trying to make everything perfect. And instead, you focus. You choose what matters. You act on what matters. You let go of what doesn't. And that's where freedom begins. Not when life becomes easy, but when you stop making everything important. Because in the end, a meaningful life is not about having everything. It's about choosing what is worth holding on to and having the courage to let everything else go. Strong closing philosophy, final ending script. At the end of all this, after every thought, every question, every moment you've tried to figure out, you arrive at something simple. Your life is not complicated. You just made too many things important. You tried to care about everything, every opinion, every outcome, every possibility, and in doing that, you lost clarity, because when everything matters, nothing truly does. You spent your time thinking, trying to get it right, trying to avoid mistakes, trying to control how everything turns out. But life was never meant to be controlled that way. You were never meant to carry everything. You were meant to choose what matters, choose what deserves your energy, choose what is worth your time, and let everything else pass. Because here's the truth most people avoid. You will always have problems. You will always face uncertainty. You will always experience moments that don't go your way. That doesn't change. What changes is how much of it you decide to carry. Because not everything deserves your attention. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not everything deserves your care. And once you understand that, your life becomes lighter, not because it's easier, but because you stopped making everything important. So as you move forward, remember this: you don't need to fix everything. You don't need to understand everything. You don't need to control everything. You just need to decide what is worth holding on to and have the courage to let everything else go. Because in the end, your life is not shaped by everything that happens to you. It's shaped by what you choose to give meaning to. Outro. Take a moment, not to think, not to analyze, just to sit with everything you've heard, because maybe the problem was never your life. Maybe it was never too complicated, never too overwhelming. Maybe you were just carrying too much, too many thoughts, too many expectations, too many things that were never meant to matter. And now you see it differently. You don't need to care about everything. You don't need to react to everything. You don't need to give meaning to everything. You just need to choose. Choose what matters. Choose what deserves your energy. Choose what is worth holding on to, and let everything else pass. Because in the end, your life becomes lighter. Not when everything is perfect, but when you stop making everything important. So, as you move forward from here, ask yourself one simple question: am I caring about the right things? And if the answer is no, then maybe this is where it begins. Not a big change, not a perfect plan, just a decision to let go and finally focus on what truly matters. If you want to listen to more content like this, more ideas, more perspective, and more moments of clarity, don't forget to follow our YouTube channel, Midnight Silence Audiobooks, because sometimes the quiet moments are the ones that change everything.